Visual Studio Team Services is an online version of Microsoft's on-premise tool called Visual Studio Team System. So services, online tool, system, what you install on your company's local area network. Visual Studio Team Services was previously called Visual Studio Online, but they changed the branding a couple of months ago. It's billed as a application lifecycle management tool, ALM tool, that helps teams and management manage application development projects at every step along the way. The great thing about Visual Studio Team Services is that there's no regional boundaries and there's very little setup that's required. A globally dispersed team can be up and running in just a few minutes and working together on the same project. Now, at the time as I record this video, if you have 5 or fewer team members, you can use Visual Studio Team Services for free. That might change by the time you watch this video. If it's, I think it's pretty reasonable if you have a larger team. And then also, one of the things that I want to demonstrate in this video is that that Visual Studio Team Services is tightly integrated with Visual Studio 2015. Even the Community Edition has the tools necessary to kind of, integrate tightly with Visual Studio Team Services. So here again, entire books have been written about Visual Studio Team System and by extension Visual Studio Team Services. So I'm not going to be able to do it justice in a short video here in just a few minutes, but hopefully this will be a gentle introduction, give you a high-level overview of the types of things and the typical workflow of from the developer's perspective of how you would use Visual Studio Team Services to help manage the things that have been assigned to you, the work items that have been assigned to you. So there's 5 distinct parts to Visual Studio Team Services. The first is the software development lifecycle process management. So whether you choose an agile approach to managing your project or something more formal like Scrum or CMMI, Visual Studio Team Services gives you the tools to manage using that process. You have tools to help you define at a high level the needs for the application, the customer's needs. Gives you the ability to break those down into what are called user stories or just stories. You can break those down further into items that are actually work that is assigned to members of the team and so on. You can track tasks and issues and bugs, and then management can watch as the team members complete these to-do items, I guess you could say, and make some projections. Are we on track? Are we on schedule? Are we going to hit our dates? And so on. All right, so here you can see that I'm logged into Visual Studio Team Services, and if I wanted to create a new project, you can see here that I get the choice of the process template. And depending on the process template that I choose, the terminology, the reports, things of that nature will be different. So I typically only choose Agile because I'm not a Scrum guy, and I certainly am not disciplined enough or even have the need for CMMI. And so really the rest of the video is going to be heavily influenced by that. But just know that if you're in an environment that requires some of these other processes, they're available to you. You also see here at the very outset as you create a new team project that you can choose what you want to use for version control. You can use the Microsoft Team Foundation version control system, or you can use Git. I typically use Git for my projects. So let's go ahead and cancel that. What I'm going to do is open up a project that I've been working on, just me and actually my son, and use this because I have some data inside of this project so that we can at least see how it all works. So I'm going to click on Manage Work here. You see here we have a nice little portal, and it allows you to get to important reports and important statistics. I'm actually going to get rid of the webcam here. You can edit the items that are actually on this portal view. I'm not going to add any widgets or make any changes to this right now. I'm just going to click on Manage Work. And from here, and especially if you're familiar with the Agile software development process, you start off by creating features, and you typically do this in terms of like a verb, and then the action that you'll take, and then the noun that you'll take it on. So managing courses, lessons, and activities. So once we have a feature, we double click that, we can give a description and kind of talk at a high level of what this feature should entail. You can break those down then into what are called user stories, or just stories. And a story takes a different format. It's more of like a script that one of the users of the system would be walking through to complete a task in the system. So it usually has, as a actor, I want to take some action so that there's some end result. So in this case, you can see that I have 3 user stories defined. As an admin, I want to create, update, and delete courses so that users can view each course. Okay, and you can see that there's a relationship here, a parent-to-child relationship between a feature and its stories. Furthermore, if we were to drill down into a user story, here again we can see descriptions and things of that nature, but you can see that it has a child, and that child is called a work item. There's different kinds of work items. There's tasks, and there's bugs, and there's issues. Tasks are things that developers typically do. Issues are typically things that management works through to help remove the hurdles from the project. Bugs, obviously, things that developers have to address. Okay, so that's one view of this hierarchy of features and stories, and then from stories to work items. So here we are in, let me click on stories here. You can see that we have a board that contains all of our user stories, and if I were to click on backlog, you'd be able to see all of the user stories, and even drill down into the individual tasks that have been created and associated with each user story. Now, for any given story, I'm able to assign it to a given iteration by dragging and dropping it into that given iteration. I click on the iteration. You can see which user stories have been assigned for a given iteration. We give the iteration a date and who the team members are. And so, for example, if we click on capacity, we can say what are the team members, is their activity in the system, and how many hours per day can they work. As far as the iteration itself, you can set the date for beginning and ending of this iteration. And then it just becomes a matter of working through all the items in the backlog. You have what's called a swim lane, a Kanban board swim lane, that allows you to see the current activity by user story for all of the individual tasks that are associated with a given user story. So in this case, we only have 2 user stories and 1 task in each. And you can see that this particular work item is currently active in the system. So I'm working on this right now. It could take up to 14 hours. Or actually, there's 14 hours of remaining work, and if we were to click into it, we can see that the original estimate was 16, so it's going to use that to determine how far along we are in the software development process and what the status of this particular task is. You see that team members can have a discussion on this task and so on. So let's go ahead and close this out. Now, from a developer's perspective, we would typically look at this from Visual Studio's point of view. So in order to get the most out of Visual Studio Team Services, you'll use the Team Explorer window, which is typically open by default whenever you open up Visual Studio Community or Greater. So what I want to do is scroll down on the Home tab to find the solutions, and I've already got this project available as a solution on my local hard drive, so I can begin working in the Solution Explorer and making changes to source files and things of that nature. Back in the Team Explorer, I can also take a look at work items that have been assigned to me, and I can do things like take a look at the tasks that have been assigned to me, and here we see that task of create scaffolding course CRUD screens, and there's 14 hours remaining, and what the current status is, and I can actually get to just about all the information here and modify it that I could get to by going online in my web browser. So I'm going to take note of this particular ID because this is a really cool feature. I'm able to actually utilize the second important feature of Visual Studio Team Services, and that's version control. And you saw whenever we created a new project that we could have chosen to use Team Foundation, version control, or Git. And so I chose Git for this project. I'm going to make one small change. This is my small change, right? And I'm going to look over here in the Solution Explorer. You can see that my file is no longer locked, but it has been changed. There's a pending edit, all right? And so say now that I have completed my task number 100 by making changes in the source code, and I've tested it, and I'm sure it works. And so now what I want to do is come over to Team Explorer. I want to go back to the home screen and then look at changes. And here what I want to do is commit this change locally, and then after I've committed it locally, I will then commit it up to Visual Studio Team Services centralized Git server. So I addressed task 100 CRUD screens for courses, something along those lines. It allows me to associate a work item by ID to this check-in. I'll click add there. And then I'm going to make sure that all the files that I need included in this commit are added into the included changes, and that there's nothing excluded or untracked that I need to make sure that's in this commit. I'll click the commit. It says, okay, great. The commit was created locally. Now sync it to share your changes with the server. So you can see that I have several outgoing commits that I'm going to go ahead and push. It says I successfully pushed them to the master, and here what I'm going to do is go ahead and say, hey, I actually completed this. The state of this particular task to closed, and I'll save that work item. And now if we were to go back and refresh our Kanban board, we would see that that particular item is now closed. Great. All right, so the next feature that I want to talk about here is the continuous integration, which is a build server that can be configured to run unit tests on the entire code base each and every time code is checked into the repository. So if a developer commits code that breaks unit tests, the team will have near instant feedback and can make appropriate fixes immediately, as opposed to determining that there's some integration issue weeks into the project when it's much more difficult for the team to make changes to the software. So what you wind up doing here is that you would say, hey, I want to create a new build definition, and I'll use this Visual Studio template. I want to make sure that we turn on continuous integration. So every time a developer checks in source code, we want it to do an entire build and then run the unit test against it to make sure that it's in good standing with all the other code that's currently in the code base right now. And if it's not, then obviously, send our team some emails and let everybody know. So I can click create, and at that point we'll have created a new build definition. I'm not going to do that for now though. The next part of the service I want to talk about is the test services, and the Test Hub has several different features to help your team test. One of the things that you can do with the Test Manager is actually test your application in the cloud by simulating hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of concurrent users on your system at the same time, just to see how it holds up under load. And some of those features are going to be a little bit more expensive because you are spinning up virtual machines that are going to then try to run your application. And then the fifth and final part of Visual Studio Team Services is the continuous deployment and release features. These allow the team to push a version of the code base to staging or even production if it's met all the unit tests, the integration tests, the performance testing criteria, everything. If that's the case, then we can create a deployment template. We can deploy out to Azure, either cloud services or to Azure website. And so by choosing this, and unfortunately this is off the screen a little bit, we can see some more of the options here. Here we go. All right, and here we can make changes, tell which subscription we want to use, which web app, the location, just all of your typical deployment features. And probably one of the more important features that we need to make sure to configure is which deployment slot that we want to use. Do we want to deploy development, to staging, or actually to production? All right, and those slots need to be set up already in Azure before you can actually use them. Okay. All right, so here again, I just ran through the features very quickly, but hopefully get a high-level overview of how Visual Studio Team Services can help you start by defining features and push all the way through to deployment. All right, so let's pick it up in the next video. We'll see you there. Thanks.